Nearly 600 pages, long time in coming. We've been aware this book was in the process for a long time. We begin tonight, though, on April 9th, 2018. Location, the White House.
You are going to do a fantastic job, and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you very much.
That may be how President Trump felt about John Bolton when he named him National Security Advisor in April 2018, but he certainly is not thanking him now.
He's been known not to tell the truth a lot.
That's because John Bolton has broken his silence in this scathing memoir set to go on sale next week. He will also appear in an ABC News special this Sunday. A small portion was released tonight.
How would you describe Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin?
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
But it appears the president is worried about John Bolton. Late tonight, the Justice Department asked a federal judge to immediately halt the publication of the book, saying it contains classified information. While the book has already been printed and distributed to booksellers, and copies have been sent to news organizations, including CBS News. Bolton's comment about Vladimir Putin is just the beginning. In excerpts from the memoir, The Room Where It Happened, Bolton says President Trump did not know Britain was a nuclear power and asked if Finland was part of Russia. Bolton confirms President Trump explicitly linked military aid to Ukraine's help in investigating his presumed opponent in the 2020 election, former Vice President Joe Biden, the central claim that led to the president being impeached. What's your reaction to that? We spoke tonight to Burbank Congressman Adam Schiff, who led the impeachment inquiry.
He does not only confirm the heart of Ukraine allegations that the president withheld hundreds of millions of military aid funds from Ukraine in order to try to coerce that country into helping his reelection, but he talks about as part of a broader pattern where he sought help from the Chinese government in his reelection, where he consistently put his own personal interests above the national interests.
Bolton claims the Ukrainian president wasn't the only foreign leader President Trump tried to enlist for help in his reelection. Bolton says President Trump pleaded with Chinese President Xi Jinping to help him win farm states in his 2020 reelection with increased Chinese purchases of soybeans and wheat. In the book, published by Simon & Schuster, a division of Viacom-CBS, Bolton claims President Trump expressed a willingness to halt criminal investigations to, in effect, give personal favors to dictators he liked, citing cases involving China and Turkey. Bolton writes, the pattern looked like obstruction of justice as a way of life. Bolton also claims during the 2018 summit of Kim Jong-un, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo slipped him a note saying President Trump is so full of expletive, a pattern Bolton claims of administration officials regularly disparaging the president behind his back. Do you intend to investigate any of the information that's coming out in this book?
I think these allegations are very serious, and I had a chance to speak briefly with the speaker about it today. I think we'll consult further about what the appropriate next steps are, but we take these allegations seriously. Even as we think it's unconscionable that John Bolton refused to tell them at the appropriate time.
The Trump administration is suing Bolton personally in a last-minute attempt to stop the book from being released next week, claiming it still contains classified information despite a several months-long government review.
I will consider every conversation with me as president highly classified. So that would mean that if he wrote a book, and if the book gets out, he's broken the law. And I would think that he would have criminal problems. I hope so.
What about all that we know so far about this book bothers you the most?
It's the pattern of a president willing to sacrifice the United States of America, its interests and its ideals for his personal and political benefit. That's just so dangerous and wrong, but it's also the utter lack of morality.
No comment tonight from the White House on the specific allegations in the book, but tonight the president did give an interview to the Wall Street Journal where he said John Bolton is a liar, and he also said, and I'm quoting him now, everybody in the White House hated John Bolton.